first one of this term. We have a guest speaker, Dr. Andrew Bailey, to talk about IP and the IPR Act and open source. He's part of, what do you call yourselves now?
Research Contracts and Innovation.
Research Contracts and Innovation Office, previously known as R6. And so I know him because I every so often ask him if I can open source my software for some of my students, and then we're also part of the steering committee for the TIA, Technology Innovation Agency Seed Fund, which funds, like if any of you guys have a cool project that you want to carry forward and deliver to the world, then the seed fund is something that can help you take that from being just a research project to being something that is actually usable in the real world context. Quick bits of center business. Does it?
Well, I don't know.
So
George graduated with distinction. I believe.
Wow!
George, stand up.
Yay! Congratulations.
Thanks.
We will celebrate you with wine and pizza maybe next month. Are you going to be around still?
I'll still be around.
All right. Is that okay? We also are growing as a center. We've added 4 new staff members, and then all of their students, not all of their students, but some subset of their students to the center. So we will do a welcome function for them at the next seminar. And so please plan to be there and urge all of your ICT4Dians to be there also, because if you aren't, I'm going to start cracking the whip. We also have not reformulated, but like expanded the executive committee. Edwin is on sabbatical, as many of you might have found out this term. Marion is also in sabbatical, and so Brian is stepping in, and he'll be in the executive committee from now on.
And Melissa is running the show.
And since Edwin is going on sabbatical, he asked me to step in as acting director, so I am now acting director. To that effect, if you want to reach the executive committee, you don't actually have to memorize all of our names and all of our email addresses. You can actually just send an email to exec@ICT4D.cs.uct.ac.za, and it'll reach everybody on the executive team, including your esteemed student representatives, Plankton here, and Lisa Canisto from IS. And then any of you can also just email any of us individually if you like. And you can reach whoever the current director or acting directors are by sending an email to director@ICT4D.cs.uct.ac.za. Update your profiles with what your research is online. If you have any trouble doing that or have any questions about it, lightning is your man.
Eduardo as well, and Anya.
Huh?
There's also Eduardo and Anya.
Who's the second name you mentioned?
Anya.
Anya. Oh, and Eduardo and Anya are also your people. So make sure to do that at some point. We need to keep this up to date. It's easier to keep it up to date if you do it on a regular basis rather than us panicking next time we have a review. Can you think of anything else? Yeah. All right, without further ado.
Super. Great. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for the invitation to come and speak to you. And as Melissa said, I'd be keen to engage with you and hear your questions, comments, concerns about this space, so that we can hopefully adapt things or ensure that we can, where possible, align with your sort of initiatives and requirements. I've kept the presentation fairly short. We do have an induction course that runs twice a year where I give more detailed information. There's also quite a bit of material online, and there will be sort of specific seminars dealing with some of these topics. So, you can hook into them separately. This is really just an overview and focus more on issues that I thought would most likely impact you. So the group that I'm from, it's now a department, research contracts and innovation. We've got sort of 3 groups. One is the contracts managers, so they deal with all of the research contracts coming into UCT. So not your photocopier supply agreement, but rather the research contracts to do the exciting stuff with. We've got the innovation team, which is where I'm from, and then a shared admin support. These people manage sort of the general sort of financial administration largely, and load funds onto SAP so that researchers can get going. So within IP services, we've, for the last few years, had merely sort of IP management, and we try and cope with the commercialization initiatives as well as all of your patenting and prosecution associated with that. A couple of years ago, we managed to get funding to start an IP commercialization unit, and it's actually helped us a great deal because these people focus purely on getting research commercialized out there, applied in industry. They're looking for funding, they're helping researchers to attract funding in that innovation space. So the 2 groups then, IP case management, who deal with primarily patenting activity or licensing, and then commercialization, where they're looking at market information that's often very useful to researchers when you're writing proposals for the innovation space. And I'll touch on seed and innovation funding, but I know that Melissa will be asking our project manager, who looks after all of the various seed funds, to come and speak to you separately on the funding that's available and what it's all about. Just in terms of licensing income, we're sort of sitting in the sort of, I guess it'll settle probably at the 3 million zone. There'll always be these spikes, as often one has sort of an upfront payment associated with a particular license or a milestone that's been reached. But we're beginning to see sort of reasonable amounts of money coming back to UCT. The other thing that's exciting is the value. It's an estimate at this stage, but some of it is based on PwC figures and assessments, that it's worth about 87 million. Which is fantastic because that will come back into the university to reward IP creators, but also go into research groups, departments, faculties to continue research, as well as sort of also supporting further innovation activities. In terms of the actual sort of IP portfolio, if I look at just the patents, we've got 163 active applications. There are 97 granted patents, so that means that they've passed the examination. And those relate back to about 108 inventions that we're currently, looking at commercialization opportunities for. To date, there have been about 17 spin-off companies. We started sort of recording them about in 2004. These are official spin-out companies. Often companies are established, but there's no link to UCT via IP. All of these have a link to UCT because of either IP moving into them or a license agreement. What I feel is great is that only 2 are no longer active, which I think is really sort of tremendous because a lot of these companies fail.
Status of Cell Life, which would have come out of the Icons group.
Right. So that is still functioning. They've had a restructure where I need to just get the sort of current detail. My understanding was that they had established a for-profit entity because they were established as a not-for-profit. And that they have established a for-profit entity because there are applications where they can actually earn some income, which makes the overall group sustainable. And I just actually had an email last week that sort of indicated that Cell Life had been sort of incorporated into this rather than a standalone. So I'll find out about that. But it's certainly a viable business and is still going and is one of the earliest businesses at UCT.
Does the for-profit entity have a different name?
Yes,
Is it
it does.
the Health Innovations or something?
It begins with an H. Yeah. Sorry, yeah. This slips my mind.
Okay, I mean,
Health Unlimited or something.
is it Health Unlimited?
Yeah.
Okay. And Peter Benjamin's still involved with
Sounds
this?
Yeah.
So we had Peter come, I mean, Ulrika was part of Cell Life
Yes,
from the
yes.
beginning. And then we had Peter actually come in about 2 years ago for a talk.
Yeah. No, I just got an email because I put Ulrika in contact with other researchers who are looking at a similar sort of type of activity, just to see how they established essentially a not-for-profit and the problems that can be associated with it.
For the benefit of everybody here who may not have been around when Cell Life was around, can you just tell us a little bit about what
Sure.
Cell Life does and then how it went from being like kind of a UCT innovation to being a spin-off?
Yeah, so it was actually from a project that was run between CPUT and UCT, and they basically were focusing on HIV and using mobile phone apps to assist people with, field workers and nurses with monitoring of patients and providing feedback regarding those patients in rural areas or whatever to a central point. They moved on to drug monitoring and communication backwards and forwards between patients, assisting those community health workers and supporting them. There are a stack of different pieces of sort of intellectual property that were moved across into Cell Life. It was originally established as a sort of not-for-profit so that they could tap into the Vodacom Foundation. So that, they needed to be that type of a company to establish themselves. One of your problems with not-for-profits is that you're very restricted in terms of what you can do with the money because you can't take it out of the not-for-profit and put it into other ventures and that sort of thing. The Center for Proteomics Genomics Research is in a similar predicament where there are opportunities to actually have a more commercial objective which can then feed back to keep your ideally sort of non-commercial community benefit aspect sustainable. That's the sort of model. So it ran within UCT and then formally moved out, and I think that they were hosted initially on CPUT's campus. I think they've moved now to a different establishment, and there were years of PhD, sort of electrical engineering, I know, theses that were all directed at new products and things going into that environment. So it was a great exercise. If you have a look at our website, there's more information and profile details on the spin-off companies. I've handed out this booklet to some people. I can certainly send up a whole host more to Melissa so that people can get them. They've just literally been released and will be coming through 2 departments. And you can get these downloaded off our website. And the 2010 one was the first time we reviewed activity. And the 2010 one has got quite a significant article about the founders of Cell Life and how it operated and the thinking, if you'd like some more details. Okay, the one that I just wanted to touch on is a newer one, which is elemental numerics. And this came out of, Prof. Anna Malan actually joined UCT with some of the code already developed. And this is now continuing to be developed within UCT, but there's a spin-off company that will be used for the commercialization activity. One of the key things that's really important is that whilst they started with aircraft design, they've got contracts with Airbus, it's software, very advanced software. They're able to apply the same sort of computational fluid dynamics modeling to commercial fabs, and they're helping a company actually in Cape Town be competitive internationally. It's fast-tracked their prototyping incredibly, and that has been a real advantage for them from a business perspective. The other very important aspect of this spin-off is that it's able to absorb graduates, PhD graduates, who otherwise would be lost to overseas because there's no entity or other company in South Africa that would require their type of skills. So again, it's another function of university spin-offs, and this was one sort of IT example. Okay, so I'm just going to run through some of the forms of IP and methods of protection. I'm sure you'll be familiar with a lot of these different IP rights and will have come across them. The first four, you've got statutory protection possible for them. We don't deal with trade secrets at UCT. We've got an open publication policy. Not all universities do. It's something that startup companies and industry can use quite successfully because maybe they haven't got money to protect the intellectual property, and as long as you keep it sort of confidential within a business, you're fine. And obviously they don't need to register the IP. In terms of IP rights, certainly trademarks which come into your environment as well. The little TA means that you're applying for the trademark, or that you're indicating that it is a business trademark but it's not registered in a particular territory. Once it's registered, you get that R in a circle that I'm sure you would have been familiar with, and in the different territories you renew it, over different periods. In South Africa it's 10 years. Copyright, which is obviously what will come in with copy software. Life of the creative for 50 years. There are sort of odd tweaks on that if it's coming out of a company and you're employed to do that work. It's sort of more hooked to publication date. An incredibly long time, I think, if you're looking at code. You probably, after someone's lifetime is 50 years, 60, 70 or more years, you're going to be onto whole new things. Anyway, design rights, and I'll mention how those can be associated with the IT environment. Patents, 20 years, if they're granted, and trade secrets, obviously, as long as they remain secret or aren't reverse engineered. So copyright, traditionally computer programs have been protected by copyright, along with a host of other works. And the requirements are that it's original, that it's produced in material form, and it subsists automatically. So you've got it automatically, whether you want it or not, okay? And there's no formal process. Interestingly, only certain territories have a formal sort of procedure for you to give up that copyright and place something in the public domain. South Africa doesn't have that. At present, they're looking at revising the Copyright Act, and I think it's one of the things that they will perhaps, include. Films can actually be registered in South Africa, and interestingly, buildings in the US came in 1999. Sorry,
with regards to material form, are you referring to like tangible or?
Yeah, so that you've got it, that you could print it out or whatever. You've got it saved on a disk. It's not just running around in your head. So these slides, so even though it's in an electronic format, it's something I could give you a sort of copy of. Great. So to indicate that, you just need to do the thing you'll be very familiar with. And 2016 was the year of creation. I've put my name down. That is whoever owns the intellectual property. So if it was Microsoft and you were working for them, that's who would be on the notice. It's merely to indicate who is the owner of that copyright. Something that a lot of people do is they'll see something on their computer screen that says sort of 2011/2012. They say, okay, it's 2016, it's expired. Okay? It's not the case. That is the period over which that copyright material was developed. So you may be developing code over a number of years and adding modules and whatever, and you just need to indicate that overall span. So as I mentioned, IP protection is protected by copyright and it's against actual copying. And what you need to do from a legal perspective is to prove that it's being copied. Okay? A good thing is always to market so that people, in theory, can get hold of you and ask for a license if it's not in an open source type of environment. And there's always the suggestion to incorporate fingerprints, i.e. redundant lines of code, so that, you know, if you got the listing or whatever, you know, which you could do through courts, you could say, well, what's this code for? There's absolutely no reason for it, and it's evidence that you copied from us. The important thing is that it protects the expression in that language, okay, and not the general concepts. And I could actually go along, and if I understood how your software, sort of the goals of it, you know, how it sort of operated, and I sat down and I could prove that I hadn't sort of, you know, I didn't have your sort of source code open and busy sort of, you know, copying it. If I had created it independently, and I could prove it, you would have no case against me. And this is where patenting gives you broader protection, and is more desirable because it protects that concept. And so no matter which language you use or how you sort of implement the protected invention, you will be covered. Obviously, this is a very new space. And again, as we were just discussing earlier, this whole story of, you know, copyright and how long it exists for, you know, again, I think there could be applications where there's no sense in patenting it because, you know, you're going to be on to the next best thing within 2 years. Often patents can take up to 6 years to get to a point where they're granted. And that's the only point where you can sort of really begin to take action against someone who's infringing your patent. Something where it is useful, well, let me just tell you, first of all, the key thing in Europe and the USA is that you're either picking up a technical effect that's required or some useful, concrete, and tangible effect. This has been as slim as increased or a decreased requirement on computing sort of power. So that is a technical effect, that it's fast enough. But the more typical things are, say, something where you've got software controlling the timing on a BMW's engine. Now that would be a great patent because you know the timing for cars are going to have to be controlled for a whole long time, and you're going to be doing it across, you know, all sorts of different vehicles manufactured by different companies and that sort of a thing. That type of concept, that would be useful, and your technical effect there is the control of the actual timing of the vehicle. There's information on our website. There's a whole sort of slide deck from a patent attorney who's done presentations at UCT before, and you can work through that, and it's got some very nice decision trees to work out whether things are patentable or not. So the US and Japan, it's through Europe, you're looking for that technical effect. The UK will be following Europe, okay?
Or not.
Or not, well, Brexit, yes. Okay, in terms of law, interestingly, a lot of patent law started in Europe, and everyone sort of developed off Britain, and everyone sort of developed off that. Europe then started driving the IP development, and UK became a follower, and now obviously, yeah, there's a little bit of a disconnect there coming. But typically, from a legal point of view, this is where they will follow the case law, and South Africa typically follows UK. Again, from a legal perspective, because of the similarity of our law, and they rely on a lot of cases.
I thought the South African Patent Act specifically, explicitly excluded software from patent.
It does, but at present, and this is the question mark that, you know, when I say, so UK does not permit it, and South Africa doesn't, but it's likely that they would follow the arguments. So it's possible that, yes, you could have a dispute, but the patent attorneys also, in the way that they craft it, steer very clear from what would be regarded as solely software. It's very integrated into a system, and it's doing, you know, the timing control or whatever. Software patents are far more complex to write because, yeah, you've got to watch, because copyright covers software, you know, the normal code. So you don't want to, you know, duplicate that.
Just another point on patents in this country. You mentioned earlier on that it took a while for some of the patents granted to be examined.
Yeah.
I thought South African patents weren't examined.
Currently, they're not examined, which really decreases their value in certain respects. But the way that are very easy to get. But if someone challenges you, it's resolved through litigation. So you would go to court, and a simple matter would cost about R1 million. So it can act as sort of a bit of a deterrent. This is where there's been so much trouble with the treatment action campaign and pharmaceutical companies getting almost frivolous patents, so-called evergreening of their patents with small tweaks here and there to their formulations, which extend the lifetime of the patent in South Africa. What's happening is there's a massive change in legislation, that's currently being reviewed and drafted that will specifically watch out for that. And the other thing is that they are currently training patent examiners in South Africa, so we will move across to an examining process. Okay, so I'll leave this, I'll send these slides to Melissa for distribution, but you can just sort of see what they're regarding as technical effects and non-technical, so that you can have a look. And as I say, Eric van Vyver's presentation on our website has got a lot more there. Registered designs, we've got two types in South Africa, either aesthetic or functional. And what's interesting in your space is that this user interface can actually be registered as a design, the particular format. Again, you're looking for something that is novel. So I don't think that the Standard Bank one is particularly sensational, but you can sometimes get ones where what's interesting is I went to a presentation and they took all of the text off a website and you knew exactly which one was which, and it's purely because of the particular layout and design. So it's just to sensitize you to aspects of IP that you can use to protect software and IT environment. Okay, so patents, you've got an application per country. There's no such thing as an international patent. You can only prosecute them when it's been granted, so catch someone that's infringing your work. And it's a monopoly that's granted for 20 years in the territory where your patent is granted. The process basically has three phases: the provisional, the patent cooperation treaty phase, and the regional or national phase. And you can see the staggering amounts that mount up for some very conservative patenting activity. We've had a couple of portfolios here at UCT that have hit the 5 million mark. And fortunately, we're hoping to get the one lot of money back, and the other lot has been obtained back from commercialization. In terms of deciding where to patent, what you're trying to do, it's an economic decision. I fight a lot with the people because for block grants, they count them like publications within UCT, and I said you can't really do that because it's an economic decision. It says nothing about the strength of the patent. Once you've got one granted patent, really that sort of says it all. It's effectively being peer reviewed and is in place. But from an economic perspective, you could have a pharmaceutical company with deep pockets who will just take every single territory that they can, whereas UCT would only pick a couple, so nothing to do with the merit. What one's trying to do is to protect either markets, so your important markets, or manufacturing areas. So if, like for electronics, that you need to be sort of have patents registered in the East because they're the low-cost production or manufacturing base. If people cannot manufacture there, they're not going to be competitively viable. You can also do sort of combinations of these two. In terms of patentability, there are three requirements. Novel, okay, so that's globally novel. So if you see something in the UK and came back here and wanted to patent it, you can't because it's literally novel internationally. It's got to be useful, which is a very easy hurdle to get across. And then it's got to be inventive, and that's probably the one that we struggle with the most because what the patent examiners do is so-called mosaic a number of papers together and say, if you read that paragraph and this paragraph, that paragraph, it's obvious. Okay. Now, you then need to argue against that. And certainly, if you're doing things that are very different to the normal practice within your field, you've gone in a different direction with it, and also sort of iterations and failed attempts to achieve it. Okay. But that tends to be a real issue, the so-called obviousness, and to argue at that. We have an invention disclosure form, so if you think that you have something that's worth protecting, just download it off our website and contact us. The important thing is to watch public disclosure, and these are the different sort of ways that disclosure can occur. Obviously, things like online blogging and things are becoming more important, where you're giving real detail of your work or putting test code up on various sites. You just need to think about your strategy before you go ahead with that. Thesis submission, we've got a mechanism now to suppress the thesis without affecting your examination. So you'll go through, graduate, but it just won't land up on Open UCT until the 2-year period has elapsed. So within UCT, you can discuss things freely. So if you go into mechanical engineering or another department or whatever, we're all under the same umbrella. You can discuss it with your colleagues. With visitors, we've got a little attendance register that at the top says, I agree to keep what I've heard confidential. If I need to discuss it at my home institution or whatever, I will contact the presenter and see whether it still needs to be maintained confidential. If it is, we can enter into a formal agreement. So it's very quick for them to sort of, sign up. Again, you need to understand whether you're going to be discussing stuff that could potentially be patentable if you've thought about your work. It's used a lot at sports science because they've got Stellenbosch University, they've got SA Rugby, and themselves, and they're all sort of discussing a host of different projects. And there's confidentiality there for a host of different reasons. There are obviously the formal undertakings, and then a lot of the collaboration agreements have already got confidentiality undertakings in them already. So, you're fine. You're collaborating with these people over several years. The large teams of both institutions, they're covered. With email, just mark it confidential, and if you say something sort of verbally, just follow it up with an email. All you want them to do is to be able to show a patent attorney that you tried to restrict somebody from discussing it openly. If they should break that and discuss it to somebody else, if you can show that evidence, you can still be granted a patent, okay, even though it's been disclosed on the web or something by somebody else, as long as you've tried to restrict that. There's an inventor's guide that can be downloaded. There are hard copies available, which you're also welcome to. It gives you a great deal more information about the process and royalties and that sort of thing. Virtual terrain software came out of computer science, and some of you who work in the space may recognize Gary and Patrick. And this is one that has, Jane. And they've landed up developing this application that can be used to create virtual terrain that can be used for computer gaming as the backdrop in films and even in virtual reality itself. This one has gone through our seed fund, our pre-seed fund, very small amounts of money, where we looked at buying competitor packages so that they could then do a proper market assessment as to why they were better or whatever, how they stacked up against those. It's gone through a tier seed fund project where they got 500,000 so that they could employ a couple of software developers and take the code a great deal further. They had a graphics person involved who did some of the artwork and that's included in the package. And we're now looking for funding for the next stage of this project, where we'll go through sort of alpha version into beta, and ideally get some early adopters in place. And at that point, your venture capital people will certainly be interested, and we've already discussed that with them at meetings. So that's just one that's gone the whole way. It's also one where we've managed to file a patent, and that's going through the examination process, and it's been really useful. Just for interest, there are 2 or 3 Microsoft patents that we found that cover certain portions of some of the sort of algorithm that they use. And we're currently negotiating with Microsoft to get a license to access those particular patents that they hold, so that we can then commercialize the software. So that would deal with freedom to operate when commercializing. So just to move on to the IP policy and the IPR Act. The policy is where all of the policies are at UCT on the home page under policies. Software comes in under tangible research property, okay? And in terms of IP ownership, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these sort of specific things, but computer software developed as part of a research project, unless it's assigned to another party in terms of a research contract, okay, would be owned by UCT. Obviously, what we do is exempt anything related to teaching. We're not going to run around computing 101 and say, you produced a new library database or whatever. We, must have that software. It's where it's associated with that, with research activity. Okay, so it's typically, master's students and up where it could begin to play a role. And that's because of the IPR Act, which I'll touch on now.
Which means that anything you guys are developing as part of your master's research or as part of a PhD thesis, anything, like by default belongs to UCT unless it's been assigned to somebody else, specifically in a research contract that the contracts office has presumably reviewed.
Yeah.
So don't agree with that policy. Now is the time to raise it with Andrew.
Yeah.
And we can discuss this.
Yeah. And noting the thing is, okay, we own it, but I'll touch on it with the IPR Act. We're very keen to support entrepreneurship and commercialization of that code. So we don't want to sit and hold it. So if you want to do something with it, speak to us, because we
Is it like a shared ownership? Like does the
No, but the benefit is shared. And certainly if you go out into a company, there's a certain percentage royalty that would be paid back to UCT. And as the IP creator, you could well land up getting a portion of that back into your pocket. But the lion's share of profit and everything you would get in your company if you commercialize the software.
and that's the thing that's negotiated with UCT at the point of
Yeah, and the intellectual property policy spells out the shares. And yes, the actual royalty percentages and everything we would then negotiate. So like James and Patrick, their software will go out. They may or may not have a startup company, so they may not actually be participating in it. So it could be a license deal, and then they're just getting a benefit through UCT and the revenue share. Or they could have shares in an external company, and then they would obviously get, dividends and whatever, and there would be a royalty of X% that would be being paid back to UCT. So, definitely, if you want to make the money, you take the risk of commercializing it and creating a company, and you would be rewarded for it. So it's definitely not sort of it's something that's required within the IPR Act, that we do take the ownership, but we've got to commercialize it. So we're eager to make things happen.
What happens if we open source it?
Okay, there one would need, and I must discuss open source specifically, which I will deal with now. Yeah. Okay. So good. Here it is. So open source is accepted as the default for teaching and research. Default, it's not prescribed. Okay. And whichever sort of license or whatever you choose. The important thing is that the National IP Management Office approval is typically required at the outset of the project that you want to release it. We are expecting a guideline, okay, because unfortunately they seem to also confuse public domain with open source, okay? And again, I feel it very much depends on the circumstances, because sometimes you've got the software going out, but actually your business model, you generate revenue in a completely different way. So the software is no concern. And it's just to motivate that through to NIPMO. We handle the process, we have a good relationship with them, and that wouldn't be a problem at all.
What if we do it? What if we've already done it? What if we've already released the software and open
It's
sourced
happened.
it?
It's happened.
Okay.
Right, Creative Commons is another now you know. But look, we it's something that we're going to be sort of engaging with them on and trying to
You know, if one speaks to government people, and I'm getting this from Hussein, they claim that the universities are much more conservative about open source than they are.
really.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a bit of
Well,
clarity
it's
there.
in our IP policy that we, promote it in that, and I'm quite happy to motivate. I'm just trying to think whether we've actually had a case where we've specifically motivated. We've done an open source 3D printed medical device, okay? Because we said, look, you're going to get 10 patients a year. There's no ways that you're going to make money out of this. It's very cheap. Let's get it out there so that people can use it. Let's open source it. They approved it. No problem. And it's the important thing about the IPR Act is that it's about benefiting South Africans. Okay, so as long as you can motivate that and why you operate in that particular mode, there's no issue. So
What I don't understand is every time one of our students develops any little piece of software and wants to put it up on GitHub and throw an Apache license on it, I don't want to have to write to you.
Exactly.
It's a waste of everything's time.
this is my issue. Does it relate to one line of code? If there's like a little forum and someone says, oh, I can't get this to do that, and you quickly just ping in, a couple of lines of code, do we have to get permission for that? So what I'm trying to do, and what I would really appreciate is, you seem to be very involved in that, is just to help me understand how you work in that environment, things like that are just ridiculous, so that we can incorporate that in the NIPMO guidelines to say, okay, it's only if it's like a significant, and how we define what is significant or not. And let's not worry about these little bits and pieces that float around. And a lot of it on its own has got no commercial benefit or societal benefit. 2 lines of code. But sometimes we can have a whole sort of huge impact. So, okay, some of the things that I've come across, I think that, open source and its importance is very dependent on your business model. Because as I mentioned, sometimes the code is, you've got an app, but actually it's supporting another business activity. So it's something you offer for free, and that's why you offer it for free, but it's driving other activity or benefit or whatever. Sometimes if you're in a commercial environment, they need to release the code. There have been instances where one of the television manufacturers found there was open source in their TVs, and they had other sort of developed some proprietary stuff that they didn't want released. So they said to people, opened a warehouse and said, come grab a TV. They didn't sell them, but it cost them a fortune. And this is where Black Duck, you may know, is all about this maintaining compliance with open source license violations, which from a commercial perspective can cost you dearly. And I think the actual license term conflict can be a major consideration. Security is another, which may or may not be relevant depending on what code you're using and how it's being controlled. And then also attracting funding. Sometimes they like to see that there is proprietary code. Again, it's all dependent on what that code's being used for within your business model. And we've had a situation where code came out of electrical engineering relating to radars, and the company, the first thing that they've done is recode it so that it's proprietary. So it's just, again, dependent on your commercial model. A host of popular licenses, which I'm sure you're all more familiar with than me. UCT, we've tended to go for this GNU GPL. Again, comments, advice, I would welcome. I know Ulrika released a little app so that communities can discuss water, at well points and that sort of thing, and that was released under that. Other UCT patents we had that were self-organizing and that optimized the energy in that space, and then a flight delay that could sort of predict how quickly an airport would recover from snowstorm or whatever, and then just efficiencies during all the phases of a flight costing. So in terms of the IPR rights, this is a government act. It has changed the way that we operate within universities and engage with funders. It encourages protection of the IP, okay, and the feeling is like with open source that you're not protecting it, okay, so this is why we need to motivate. And the important thing is commercialization for the good of South African citizens, and for commercialization you must think of societal benefit, not just rands and cents. It's pitched like that. And the benefit share obviously comes in with the IP policy. So in terms of the IP ownership, if you're above full cost, so your project has been costed at full cost, all of the time has been accounted for in overheads and things like that, then if it's so greater than or equal to the funder, you can own the IP. So if Microsoft comes along and sponsors a project, they can own it if they paid the full cost for doing that research work. Okay? If they haven't, the default is that UCT would own it. You can have situations where you can have joint ownership, and this often happens when you've got a research collaboration. And just in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but you've got to meet all of these 4 conditions, and this 4th one, the joint creation of the IP, is the key thing. So for us, where you're looking more at patents, your joint inventorship, that you participated in that inventive step, is key. Okay? With you, if it's related to particular code or whatever, it would be co-creation if they've added some code to it. The other thing is that if you go for a patent, again, you would be questioning, did they participate in the inventive step, i.e. thinking, well, it could be applied to a car. Pre-seed fund, so it's blocks of 20,000. You can have several blocks, and then a single block of 100,000, which can assist your project. So again, speak to us. We happy postgrads can access it. It will obviously go under their supervisor because they can't hold a research fund, and it's obviously open to UCT staff as well. There's the TSC fund, and Francois will provide you with a lot more information about this. This is something that James and Patrick have used, have experience of, sort of within your environment, so please chat to them, and I think they found it to be quite a good experience. Avalobi, we're currently funding through that 500,000 seed fund for the next stage, so that market development, the market interface, engagement with fishers are able to sell to Woolworths and restaurants and whatever, and that obviously you guys will all be aware is a fantastic project. And again, this is where we're regularizing things with NIPMO, their government walk-in rights, all sorts of things. If you don't report it properly, we're just getting it sorted and noting this and the benefit and what's happening. NIPMO will be thrilled with the model. As I mentioned, the Vula courses, these are 4 modules where you can get PowerPoint with sound to flip through sort of things in more detail. There's a stack of stuff on our website. Please do use it as a resource, and my contact details. So I'll give these slides through to Melissa so that she can distribute them. But look, open source and release of these lines of code versus 16 pages of code. These are issues that NIPMO have been busy with a number of other issues, but this public domain versus open source, and then the practical implementation of reporting and approvals and everything. We need to get a handle on that. So I'd be happy to receive emails, to engage further on that so that I'm informed when I go to their workshops and everything and say that this isn't going to work for us. And obviously if we get a draft guideline, we will include the community to assess that. So great.
Maybe like one thing I can do is like I'll draft sort of a forum letter that we can send to you for NIBO about motivate open sourcing of all of the ICT4D software. And then if you have something you want to open source, you can just take that, add in your project's name, and then send it on to Andrew, or I can send it on to you either way.
Yeah, I guess my question is still, I mean, at this stage, maybe it's beneficial to you. Do you want, as supervisors, do you want us to email you every time we have a student who starts working on a project to say we want this, and then after you get this many emails in your inbox, you'll be like, hey, let's read this,
which gives us the evidence of
Yeah.
what the requirements are. Typically, one needs to get the permission at the outset. As I say, I've done it for other things. I haven't done it for open source software. Ulrika's was pre-act software, so it's only sort of coming in now. Yeah, it's something that I guess we've partially turned a blind eye to. A lot of the stuff has been exempted because it's been pushed in through information systems, student things, and whatever. Those honours courses and final year where they develop systems. We say that it's related to teaching. Just cut all of that out there. And it's but I would welcome emails so that I can get a feel for it. Sorry?
What one could do is, I've always put in the MOUs for the students, so that's the science faculty requires, and then standing in there is a clause about IP protection.
Yes.
And I always put in there software, except the podcast where it's not the case, that all software will be open source.
Yeah.
So one would need a connection of those things.
Yeah.
Presumably.
Yeah.
How legal
I
is
think very much.
and every contract, like every
Well, let's try and get a few through so that it can sort of give me a perspective of what's sort of actually going on. And again, it helps me to engage with NIPMA and say, look at this, look at this, look at this. How this doesn't make sense. We've done it on clinical trials where we were doing TB drugs, where they were creating havoc for UCT researchers, and they came up with a little sort of exception and guideline that still sort of argued within the principles and gave us pre-authorization that it was fine. So they're not like your typical sort of bureaucrat type of thing. They really engage and try and help because what you guys are doing is exactly what they want you to promote. So, question?
I'm sure that we would be quite interested in being able to reverse the default of, the assumption that it's proprietary by default and that you have to apply for some special exemption to go open source.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be that, that legislation hasn't actually understood the fact that you're basically hiding 99.9% of everything that ever gets done because it's a very small fraction that ever gets commercialized.
Yeah.
So you're essentially suppressing all these opportunities for learning from, people who are not necessarily motivated to be commercializing or who are wanting to share simply because they participate in a different ethos, which is very powerful. Not everybody is driven to be making a profit out of solving other people's problems. Some people just want to solve the problem as quickly as possible. Or to give people the tools to solve their own problems.
No, quite right.
So for me, it's a problem. And as an institution, we should at least be setting up an alternative. Given our open access policies and so on,
Correct.
It seems like we're saying two completely different things.
No, we're not. We're complying with South African legislation.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm very keen to create a space for this so that there is minimal approval and only in certain circumstances or whatever. One of your big problems is that copyright subsists automatically. So, and look, in theory it should be a quick approval. again, maybe it's a story of when all of the MOUs come in, we get a batch together and say, right, there we go, these are the projects, can we have blanket approval for this type of thing?
The fact that copyright subsists automatically is precisely how open source works. Open source depends on copyright. So there's not a contradiction there. What occurred to me, our ex-DVC, who's now head of, and about to end his term as head of CSR, I got the impression he was very in favor of the whole open source movement. It would be worth maybe getting a consortium of people or a group of people together who could argue this point if one were interested in arguing.
Yes. No, I think that's a good suggestion. And even within DST, you've got, I don't know how many of you received the NRF communication where you've got to make your data open access from your grants. It's a total contravention to the Act. Okay? And there was a whole drama within DST. So this is one arm of DST and another, because NIPMO fits in under DST. And the way that they've solved it is that we should have protected the IP by patenting before the release of that data. So, fine. We're through that one, and so it's minimal impact to us because people should be screening their work for patentability. But I think it's to just highlight and raise that issue, and the bizarre things like the South African Reserve Bank, okay, who have a particular thing. You go there and argue that you guys are doing X, Y, or Z, that it's impossible. They said we've never had an application to address this, to authorize this type of thing. And so they've got no evidence of it. And what we've been doing, like with the clinical trials case, but with exchange control, they're just bombarding them. We send blocks of agreements out. And now they've said, okay, great, we understand what you're doing. You've got local authorization to do it. No problems. And I think this is the thing, is to get that evidence, and let's get some stuff together. They're revising the IPR Act. It's the first they've first got a review, and then they will be amending the IPR Act, and that is when we've got to get in and clarify how that whole system works.
Have they been providing the IPR for an awfully long time?
No. The Act is 2010. We've been working with that. They've been producing guidelines, which have helped us a great deal. They're now conducting a review, which will be in the next, say, 6 months, and then the process will start. The problem is that the process will end in 2020. Okay? So what we need to do is make very sure, because these amendments are not, if you think of Parliament, they're not going to sit, and they've got so many other policy development going on. So we need to really get in and push. But certainly, I keep putting this onto their radar, that it's something that needs to be resolved. I know Stellenbosch University are very hot about open source as well, and trying to resolve the situation. So I think we can, get some engagement going, but I will definitely watch for it with the ambitions and look forward to your
So I think you realize there's a significant community of us here who don't support the notion of changing the South African law with respect to patents and software, and regard it as a benefit that software is explicitly non-patentable. And I believe that there are now some second thoughts about useful software patenting has been to the US. So one really has to look at what is going on there, about whether we should change the Act. Because I know the patent attorneys are very keen, and that I've forgotten the name of the guy you quoted, who gave that presentation you have on your website.
Eric van Veen.
Yeah, from
Consultants. He's from Consultants, but Spur and Fisher.
Yeah, they're all very keen that we change our laws. But I think there are many of us who believe that would be a major mistake.
Noting though that you don't need to patent.
Yeah, precisely. But then you mentioned that NIPMO said
You want to protect. You must protect. So, but this is the thing that I think we've got to fully understand. But they also give us the right to choose the appropriate protection form. So, you know, and I think this is where, again, with the open source and sort of what the business model is, or the initiative, and how the software fits in, that to me is piece of the puzzle that I must always talk about. Great, but thanks a lot. Please do send emails out really from staff members. Welcome, you know, comments and examples of stuff that you're having to deal with Price. Because we see them regularly, and you know, I can then sort of feed it and sort of think about how we would manage it. Yeah, because I agree with you. Good, thanks so much.